The Lagos rain poured down in sheets as Amara Okonkwo stood stranded outside the Eco Hotel, where a company's annual gala had just ended. Her designer heels were already soaked, and every taxi that passed was occupied. She clutched her beaded Valentino purse, cursing herself for dismissing her driver early to avoid seeming pretentious in front of her colleagues. The gala had been suffocating. 3 hours of fake smiles, shallow conversations, and men who looked at her like a conquest to be won. As the daughter of Chief Okonkwo, one of Lagos's prominent businessmen, Amara had grown accustomed to being pursued for all the wrong reasons. Her last relationship had ended when she discovered her boyfriend was more interested in her father's connections than in her. "Madam, you need taxi?" A warm voice cut through the sound of rain and her spiraling thoughts. Amara turned to see a battered yellow taxi pulling up beside her. The driver leaned over, his smile genuine despite the late hour and terrible weather. Unlike the aggressive hawking of other Lagos drivers, his approach felt respectful, almost concerned. There was something different about him, a quiet confidence that didn't demand anything from her. "Yes, please," she said, grateful for any escape from the downpour. As she settled into the surprisingly clean interior, she noticed small details that seemed at odds with the taxi's worn exterior. A worn copy of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart sat on the passenger seat, its pages dog-eared and annotated. Classical music played softly on the radio, Vivaldi, if she wasn't mistaken. Not the usual loud Afro beats or gospel music she expected. The car smelled faintly of sandalwood, and despite the cracked leather seats, everything was meticulously organized. "Victoria Island," she said, giving her address in an exclusive neighborhood. "Bad night to be stranded," he said conversationally, his English flawless and accent educated. "That gala must have been something. I saw all those fancy people going in earlier. Everyone looked like they were attending a competition rather than a party." Amara found herself smiling, the first genuine smile of the evening. She studied him in the rear-view mirror. He was handsome in an understated way, kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, strong features, and easy confidence that seemed at odds with his humble profession. He looked to be in his early 30s, with closely cropped hair and hands that gripped the steering wheel with a certainty that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin. It was exhausting, actually, she found herself admitting, surprising herself with her honesty. All pretense and peacocking. Everyone trying to outdo each other with their designer labels and inflated job titles. He chuckled, a rich sound that filled the car. "I can imagine. I drove a banker home from that same hotel last month. He spent the entire ride on the phone bragging about his bonus while trying to negotiate my fare down by 50 naira. The irony wasn't lost on me." "That sounds about right," Amara said, laughing despite herself. "I'm surrounded by people like that every day." "Then you need better company," he said simply. "I'm Chitty, by the way, since we're being honest with each other." Amara. They fell into conversation that flowed surprisingly easily, as if they'd known each other for years rather than minutes. Chitty spoke about literature with a passion that reminded her of her university days, before corporate life had dulled her love of reading. He discussed philosophy, questioned the meaning of success in modern Lagos, and shared his dreams in Nigeria, where character mattered more than connections. He didn't ask about her job or her obvious wealth, the designer dress, the expensive jewelry, the address that screamed privilege. Instead, he asked about her favorite books, her thoughts on Lagos's changing landscape, whether she thought the city was losing its soul to commerce. He spoke about Fela Kuti's music and its continued relevance, about the poetry of Nios and Dare, about the responsibility of their generation to build something meaningful. Amara found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. She talked about feeling trapped in a world of materialism, about missing the simpler joys of life, about wanting to be seen for who she was rather than what she represented. Chitty listened, truly listened, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that revealed a depth of character she rarely encountered. When they arrived at her building, with its imposing gates and security guards, Amara felt genuinely disappointed that the ride was over. For 35 minutes, she'd been just Amara, not Chief Okonkwo's daughter, not the marketing executive, not the eligible bachelorette, just herself. "What do I owe you?" she asked, reluctant to end the connection. 2,000 naira, he said, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. She handed him 5,000. Keep the change. And, do you have a business card or number? I might need a reliable driver. Chitty smiled, understanding flickering in his eyes. For rides or for conversation? Amara felt her cheeks warm despite her usual composure. Perhaps both. He wrote his number on a worn piece of paper with handwriting that was surprisingly elegant. I'll be hoping you call Amara, and not just because I need the business. As she watched his taxi disappear into the rainy night, something shifted in her heart. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely interested in getting to know someone, not for their status or connections, but simply for who they were. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about the taxi driver with kind eyes and a mind that challenged hers. 3 days later, she called, not for a ride, but to ask if he'd like to meet for lunch at a modest bukka in Yaba, far from her usual haunts. I thought you'd never ask, Chitty said, his voice warm with pleasure. I've been driving past your building 3 times hoping to see you. Amara laughed, feeling something she'd almost forgotten, the flutter of genuine attraction, untainted by calculation or expectation. Want to know what happens when Amara chooses her heart over society's expectations? Don't miss next chapter. Subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of this beautiful love story. Drop a comment below. Would you marry for love against all odds? Let's discuss. Their lunch at the small bukka turned into a 3-hour conversation that flowed like the smoothest palm wine. Chitty arrived in casual clothes, simple jeans and a white shirt, yet he carried himself with a dignity that made heads turn. They talked about everything from childhood memories to their dreams of future, sharing plates of rice and stew while the world buzzed around them. That lunch turned into dinner at an open-air suya spot. Dinner turned into weekend walks along Bar Beach, where they'd remove their shoes and let the Atlantic waves wash over their feet while debating whether love was a choice or a feeling. They visited art galleries in Freedom Park, attended poetry readings in cramped bookshops, and discovered hidden corners of Lagos that Amara had never known existed despite living there all her life. Chitty introduced her to his world, a world where wealth was measured in laughter and connections rather than bank accounts. They ate at modest restaurants where the food was delicious and the company genuine. He took her to community gatherings where people shared what little they had with open hearts. Through his eyes, Amara began to see a Lagos she'd been insulated from, a city pulsing with real life beneath the glossy veneers she'd always known. Within 3 months, Amara was completely in love with Chitty. His wisdom that came from observation rather than privilege, his humor that found joy in simple moments, the way he saw her as a complete person rather than a beautiful accessory or a useful connection. When he kissed her for the first time under the stars at Lekki Conservation Center, she felt something she'd never experienced with any of the wealthy suitors her parents had paraded before her. Complete certainty. My parents want to meet you, Amara said one Sunday evening as they shared jollof rice in a small apartment in Surulere. The apartment was tiny, a bedroom, sitting room, and kitchenette that could fit inside her walk-in closet, but it was clean, organized, and filled with books that lined makeshift shelves. Chitty's expression grew serious, the joy draining from his face. Amara, you know what I am. A taxi driver living in a 1-bedroom flat in Surulere. Your family, they won't approve. Chief Okonkwo didn't build his empire to see his daughter marry down. I don't care, she said firmly, taking his hand across the small wooden table. I've dated wealthy men, lawyers, doctors, businessmen, who treated me like a trophy to be displayed or a stepping stone to my father's network. You treat me like a treasure, like someone whose thoughts and dreams matter. That's the difference, Chitty. That's everything. The meeting with her parents was a disaster that exceeded even her worst fears. Her father, Chief Okonkwo, barely contained his rage, his face turning purple as Chitty sat calmly in their opulent living room, surrounded by Italian furniture and crystal chandeliers that cost more than his annual income. A taxi driver? Amara, have you lost your senses? Chief Okonkwo thundered. You're a marketing executive with an MBA from London Business School. We sent you to the best schools, gave you every advantage. And this is how you repay us? With shame. And those schools taught me to value character over cash, substance over status, Amara replied calmly, though her heart was breaking. Chitty is educated, intelligent, kind, and hardworking. What more should I want in a husband? Her mother wept dramatically, dabbing at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. What will people say? Our daughter marrying a taxi driver? The shame will kill us. Your sisters marry doctors and executives. What will we tell our friends? Our business associates? Tell them I married for love. Tell them I chose happiness over appearances. Her father stood, his voice cold and final. Marry him, and you're no longer our daughter. No inheritance, no family support, nothing. You'll be on your own with your love. Let's see how long romance lasts when you're struggling to pay rent. Amara stood as well, tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady. Then I guess this is goodbye, Daddy. I'm sorry I couldn't be the daughter you wanted me to be. She walked out her childhood home with Chitty beside her, knowing she might never walk back in. 6 weeks later, they married in a simple ceremony at the registry in Acadia. Only Chitty's few friends attended. Other drivers, a neighbor, a couple from his church. No white wedding, no reception with a live band, no family. Just two people promising forever in a small room with fluorescent lights that flickered, witnessed by strangers who were paid to be there. Amara moved into Chitty's modest apartment, leaving behind her luxury flat in a koi with infinity pool and panoramic views. Her friends stopped calling, their numbers suddenly always busy when she reached out. Former colleagues whispered when she passed in the hallways at work, conversations stopping abruptly. The social media comments were brutal when news spread. Gold digger in reverse, poverty mentality. She's thrown her life away for foolish love. But when Chitty held her at night in their small bed, when he kissed her forehead and told her she was the bravest person he'd ever met, none of it mattered. Any regrets? He asked one evening as they ate beans and fried plantain, a far cry from the five-star restaurants and champagne brunches she was used to. Amara looked around their tiny apartment, at the second-hand furniture and peeling paint, at the man who'd given her his whole heart, and she kissed him deeply. Not a single one. You're worth more than all their approval combined. What she didn't see was the pain that flickered across Chitty's face when she turned away, the guilt that haunted him as he watched her sacrifice everything for a love built on his deception. The weight of his secret grew heavier each day, but his father's instructions had been clear. 1 year, no exceptions. He was only 6 months in. Is Amara's sacrifice worth it, or is she being foolish? What secrets is Chitty hiding that burden him so heavily? Find out in next chapter. Like this video, subscribe to African Tales by Zion, and share with someone who believes in true love. Comment below, what would you sacrifice for love? Your thoughts matter to us. Amara adapted to her new life with a grace that surprised even herself. She learned to shop at Oyingbo Market, haggling with vendors over prices of tomatoes, peppers, and dried fish. The first time she successfully negotiated a 100 naira discount, she'd rushed home to tell Chitty like it was a major victory. Her designer wardrobe gave way to simple African prints bought from roadside vendors and second-hand shops in Yaba. She learned which days a market had the freshest produce, which bus routes avoided the worst traffic, and how to make 1,000 naira stretch for 3 days of meals. You're glowing, her assistant remarked one morning at the office, unable to hide her surprise. Poverty suits you, I suppose. Or maybe it's just a delusion of romance. The comment was meant to sting, but Amara only smiled, refusing to take the bait. Happiness suits me, Ngozi. You should try it sometime instead of bitterness. At home, their tiny apartment became a sanctuary from a world that judged them harshly. Chitty cooked elaborate meals with cheap ingredients, filling their space with laughter and the aroma of spices. He'd make pepper soup with just the right amount of heat, jollof rice that rivaled her mother's famous recipe, and on special days, fried fish that was perfectly crispy. They couldn't afford restaurants, but their dining table, a second-hand piece Chitty had refinished himself, became the site of the best meals Amara had ever eaten. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Chitty would read to her from his collection of books, acting out different characters until she was breathless with laughter. On weekends, They walked through markets hand in hand, dreaming aloud about the children they'd have one day, the small house they'd save for, the life they'd build together one modest step at a time. 3 children, Amara would say, leaning into him as they walked. 2 girls and a boy. Why not 4? Chitty would counter, kissing her temple. We have a lot of love to give. But as the weeks passed, Amara began noticing small inconsistencies that didn't quite fit the picture of a struggling taxi driver. Chitty spoke casually about places he shouldn't have visited, mentioning the architecture of Dubai's Burj Khalifa, the museums of London, the beaches of Seychelles, then quickly changing the subject when she asked when he'd traveled there. He quoted from first edition books that cost more than supposed weekly earnings, books she knew weren't available in Lagos's regular bookshops. His English was impeccable. His table manners refined in a way that spoke of formal training rather than self-teaching. He knew which fork to use for what, how to properly hold a wine glass, the etiquette of formal dining, details that seemed strange to someone who claimed to have grown up in modest circumstances. When business news came on the radio, he'd make insightful comments about market trends and corporate strategy that seemed beyond a taxi driver's interest or knowledge. Most puzzling was his education. One evening, while helping her with a complex marketing analysis for work, he'd casually solved a problem that had stumped her entire team, demonstrating knowledge of advanced business concepts and statistical analysis that didn't match his story of dropping out of university to support himself. Where did you learn all this? She'd asked, genuinely curious. Books, he'd said quickly, too quickly. I read a lot, remember? When she asked about his family, his eyes would cloud over and he'd become evasive, his usual openness replaced by careful vagueness. My parents died when I was young, he'd say, then skillfully redirect the conversation to her family, her work, anything but his past. One Saturday, while Chitty was out driving his taxi, Amara decided to clean their bedroom thoroughly. As she organized a small wardrobe, just a few shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, work clothes, she found a wallet tucked in the back of his drawer, hidden beneath some old newspapers. It wasn't the worn leather wallet he used daily. This one was expensive Louis Vuitton, still in pristine condition. Her heart racing with a mixture of curiosity and guilt, she opened it. Inside was a photograph that made her breath catch. It showed a younger Chitty, maybe 25 years old, wearing an expensive tailored suit that probably cost more than 6 months of his current rent. He stood in front of a massive mansion, not just a big house, but an estate with manicured lawns, a fountain, and classical architecture. Behind him was a prominent sign, Okafor Industries headquarters. Her hands trembled as she stared at the photo. Okafor Industries was one of West Africa's largest conglomerates, manufacturing, real estate, technology, telecommunications. Everyone in Lagos knew the Okafor name. They were featured regularly in business magazines, their wealth legendary, their influence spanning multiple countries. The company was worth billions, its reach extending across Africa and beyond. Why would Chitty have this photo? Was he connected to the Okafor family somehow? A distant relative? A former employee? But the way he stood in that picture, the confidence in his posture, the expensive clothes, it spoke of belonging, not employment. When Chitty returned that evening, Amara was sitting on their small sofa, the photograph in her hands. He froze when he saw it, his face draining of color. Who is this, Chitty? She asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the chaos in her mind. The truth. Now, no more evasions. He sank onto the sofa beside her, his shoulders slumping as if a great weight was pressing down on him. His face was a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that the secret was finally out, dread of what would come next. I was going to tell you, he said quietly. Soon. I needed more time. Time for what? To keep lying to me? To keep playing whatever game this is. To be sure, he whispered, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her chest tighten. To be absolutely sure that what we have is real. Amara's hands trembled, anger and fear warring in her chest. What are you talking about? What aren't you telling me? Tomorrow is our 6-month anniversary, Chitty said, his voice heavy with emotion. I want to tell you then. I have a surprise planned. Everything was supposed to be revealed tomorrow. Please, Amara, trust me one more day. After tomorrow, you'll understand everything. I promise you, everything will make sense. How can I trust you when you've been hiding this? She held up the photograph. This looks like you're someone important at Okafor Industries. Who are you really, Chitty? Tomorrow, he pleaded, taking her hands. Give me until tomorrow. It's just one more day, and then no more secrets. I swear on everything I hold dear, which is you, Amara. It's you. If you can't trust my words, trust the last 6 months. Trust what we built together. Against her better judgment, against every logical instinct screaming at her to demand answers now, she agreed. But that night, she barely slept, lying rigid beside him, staring at the ceiling and wondering who the man beside her really was. Was anything about their relationship real? Had she been a fool all along, sacrificing everything for a love that might be built entirely on lies? What is Chitty hiding? Will Amara's trust be rewarded or shattered? The truth is finally coming in next chapter. Subscribe to AfricanTales by Zion and turn on notifications so you don't miss the shocking revelation. Comment your predictions below. Who do you think Chitty really is? The next morning, Chitty was unusually nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he made breakfast. He'd barely slept either. Amara had heard him tossing and turning all night, getting up several times to pace their small living room. Now he moved around their tiny kitchen with jerky movements, spilling coffee and burning the eggs, tasks he usually performed with easy grace. Wear your best dress today, he said, his voice tight with anxiety. The green one you wore to the gala where we met. Please. Where are we going? She asked, her stomach churning with a mixture of anxiety, anticipation, and anger that hadn't fully dissipated overnight. You'll see. Please, Amara, just trust me a few more hours. She wore the dress, one of the few designer pieces she'd kept from her old life, emerald green silk that had cost more than Chitty's monthly rent. It felt strange against her skin now, fore and after months of simple cotton and ochre prints. As she applied makeup she rarely wore anymore, she studied her reflection. She looked like her old self, polished, sophisticated, expensive, but she didn't feel like that person anymore. These past 6 months had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. At exactly noon, the rumble of engines drew her to the window. Her heart nearly stopped. A convoy of luxury vehicles was pulling up outside their modest building. 3 gleaming Mercedes G-Wagons, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and what looked like a Bentley Bentayga. Neighbors rushed to their windows. Children stopped playing in the street, and the security guard for their building stood frozen in shock. Chitty, what's happening? Amara whispered, her heart pounding so hard she could hear in her ears. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, a man in a crisp black suit who moved with military precision. He approached their apartment door, knocking respectfully while other security personnel fanned out, creating a perimeter around the building. When Chitty opened the door, the chauffeur bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect. Mr. Okafor, he said in a voice trained to perfection, everything is ready. The board is waiting, sir. And may I say, sir, it's good to have you back. Mr. Okafor? Amara whispered, the blood draining from her face as her worst fears began to materialize. Chitty turned to her, and in that moment, she saw a transformation. The humble taxi driver's demeanor fell away, replaced by something else, an authority, a confidence, a bearing that spoke of power and command. Yet his eyes remained the same, filled with love and fear in equal measure. My full name is Chidinma Okafor Jr., he said quietly. My father was Chidinma Okafor Sr., founder and CEO of Okafor Industries. He died 2 years ago from a heart attack and left me everything. The company, the properties, the investments, all of it. Billions of naira, Amara. More money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. Amara backed away, her legs hitting the sofa, forcing her to sit before she collapsed. No, this can't be real. Chitty knelt before her, his hands hovering near hers but not touching, as if he was afraid she'd shatter. But there was a condition to the inheritance, my father's final test. Before I could claim everything, I had to live as an ordinary man for 1 full year, starting from the day of his funeral. My father believed wealth corrupted people, made them forget what truly mattered. He wanted me to understand real life, real struggle, real people. But more than that, he paused, his voice cracking with emotion. More than that, he wanted me to find a woman who would love me for who I am, not what I have. Every woman I dated before his death, and there were many, only saw my wealth. They loved the lifestyle, the status, the access to power. When my father got sick, he made me run a test. I told 3 women I was dating that I'd lost everything in bad investments. Within a week, all 3 had moved on to richer men. That's when my father created this plan. So this was all a test? Amara's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. Our entire relationship, our marriage, everything we built, all of it was just part of some elaborate game. The circumstances were a test, Chitty said desperately, finally taking her hands even as she tried to pull away. The situation was engineered, but my feelings never were. I fell in love with you that first rainy night. Amara, the way you talk about feeling trapped in a world of pretense, the intelligence in your eyes, your genuine heart. I knew within an hour that you were different. Then why didn't you tell me? She cried. If you love me so much, why let me sacrifice everything? I lost my family, Chitty. My father won't speak to me. My mother cries every time someone mentions my name. I gave up my apartment, my lifestyle, my social circle, everything, and you let me do it knowing it was all fake. Because I had to know it was real, he said, his own tears falling now. I watched you choose me over your inheritance. I watched you defend me to your father, walk away from everything you knew, adapt to poverty without complaint. I watched you haggle for tomatoes in the market and laugh about it. I watched you take public buses and treat it like an adventure. Every sacrifice you made proved what no other woman ever did. Your love is real, Amara. It's not based on money or status. You love Chitty the taxi driver, not the Okafor heir. And yours? She asked bitterly, pulling her hands free. How can I believe anything about you is real? You're an actor. You played a role for 6 months. How do I know the man I fell in love with even exists? Because I was willing to stay in that taxi, in this apartment, with you, forever if that's what it took, Chitty said fiercely. The year my father acquired, I would have extended it to 10 years if you'd asked. The money means nothing without you. Amara, these past 6 months, living in this tiny apartment, eating simple meals, struggling with you, they've been the happiest of my life. Not despite the poverty, but because of the truth underneath it. You saw me, the real me, not the inheritance or the company, just me. You should have told me, she shouted, standing abruptly. You should have trusted me with the truth. You claim I passed your test, but you failed mine. You failed the test of honesty, of respect, of treating me like an equal partner who deserved to make informed choices about her own life. Outside, the chauffeur waited patiently. The cars gleamed in the noon sun. A life of unimaginable luxury awaited them. Mansions, private jets, unlimited resources. Everything Amara had walked away from and more. But all she felt was betrayal. A deep wound in her heart that money couldn't heal. I need to leave, she said, her voice hollow. I need to think. Amara, please. No, she cut him off. You want to talk about tests? Then here's mine for you. Give me space. If you truly love me, respect my need to process this. I'll contact you when I'm ready, if I'm ever ready. She walked past him, past the chauffeur who tried to offer her a ride, past the luxury cars and shocked neighbors, and disappeared into the Lagos afternoon, leaving Chitty standing in the doorway of their tiny apartment, the man who had everything except what mattered most. Amara's world has been completely shattered. Will she forgive Chitty's deception, or will she walk away from both love and wealth? The powerful conclusion awaits in next chapter. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Like this video, and share your thoughts. Can love truly survive deception? Is Chitty wrong for what he did, or was it justified? Drop your passionate comments below. Amara didn't speak to Chitty for 3 days that felt like 3 years. She stayed with Sandra, a former colleague who, ironically, suddenly answered her calls enthusiastically now that the truth was out. The woman who'd ignored her messages for months was now falling over herself to be accommodating, her small apartment suddenly too small and her spare room not fit for Mrs. Okafor. The hypocrisy was so thick Amara could taste it like bitter cola on her tongue. The news had spread through Lagos like harmattan fire. Social media was ablaze with the story. The poor taxi driver was actually the Okafor heir, and his wife was now one of the wealthiest women in Lagos. Amara's phone wouldn't stop ringing, buzzing constantly like an angry wasp. Her parents, who disowned her 6 months ago, now called 15 times a day. Her mother left tearful voice messages. "Darling, we always knew you were wise. We were just testing you, too, to see if your love was strong. Come home. Let's plan a proper reception." Her father, who'd called her a disgrace to the family, now wanted to discuss business opportunities and rebuild their relationship. Friends who'd mocked her poverty now praised her strategic marriage and long-term thinking. The social media comments had flipped completely. She was smart all along, gold digger but make it genius, playing 4D chess while we played checkers. The hypocrisy was suffocating, making her feel dirty, as if she'd actually been scheming all along instead of simply following her heart. Even Sandra, in whose apartment she was staying, kept hinting about introductions to Chitty's wealthy friends and business connections. On the 4th day, exhausted by the falseness surrounding her, Amara stood at Sandra's window, staring at Lagos sprawl below. Her phone buzzed again, her mother calling for the 30th time. She turned it off, craving silence, craving truth in a world that suddenly seemed built entirely on lies. That's when she heard the familiar rumble of an engine, but it wasn't a luxury car. Looking down, she saw Chitty's battered yellow taxi pulling up outside Sandra's building. Her heart clenched painfully in her chest. He climbed out, not in a designer suit, but in the simple jeans and white shirt he'd worn on their first date at the Buka in Yaba. He looked up, somehow knowing which window was hers, and their eyes met across the distance. Amara went down without thinking, her feet carrying her before her mind could interfere. When she reached the street, Chitty stood beside his taxi, the same taxi he'd driven the night they met, the same taxi he kept driving even after she discovered his secret. "I'm not here as Chidima Okafor Jr., billionaire heir," he said quietly, his voice carrying the late afternoon air. "I'm here as Chitty, the man who fell in love with you over a conversation about Achebe, the man who taught you to cook beans and plantain, the man who holds you when you sleep and who counts your breathing to fall asleep himself." "You deceived me," Amara said, but her voice lacked the sharp anger of days before. The fury had burned itself out, leaving behind something more complex, hurt confusion, and underneath it all, a love that refused to die despite the betrayal. "I did, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me." He pulled out his phone, opening a video file. "But I need you to understand something. Watch these, please. They're recordings my father made before he died. He wanted me to see what people really wanted from me." The videos played one after another, each more heartbreaking than the last. They showed women who dated Chitty in his billionaire persona. Beautiful, sophisticated women who proclaimed eternal love. Then came the tests. Chitty telling them about financial losses, business failures, bankruptcy. Within days, sometimes hours, each woman was gone. One left a voice message saying she couldn't do poverty. Another was caught on camera, laughing with friends about her narrow escape from a broke man. A third immediately started dating his business rival. "My father showed me these," Chitty said, his voice thick with old pain, "and told me that wealth was a mask that hid people's true faces. He made me promise that before taking over the company, I'd find someone who loved me without the mask. I became cynical Amara. I thought real love didn't exist, that every relationship was transactional. Then I met you," he continued, stepping closer, "and you proved me wrong every single day. You chose me when you thought I had nothing. You defended me to your father when it cost you your inheritance. You walked away from everything you knew. You learned to live on a budget, to bargain in markets, to find joy in simple things. You didn't just say you loved me. You proved it through sacrifice." "But it wasn't real," Amara whispered, though her conviction was wavering. "Your poverty was fake, which means my sacrifice was meaningless. Your love was real," Chitty insisted, taking her hands. Your sacrifice was real. Your commitment was real. Every choice you made believing I was a taxi driver who would never give you wealth or status. That's what made it matter, Amara. You didn't love me hoping I'd become rich someday. You loved me accepting I'd be poor forever. He pulled out a worn envelope from his pocket. The board of Okafor Industries has been running the company while I completed my father's requirement. Yesterday was officially 1 year since his death. This envelope contains documents making you co-owner of everything. Not because you married me after finding out I'm rich, but because you married me when you thought I was poor. My father's was stipulated that whoever I married during that year, regardless of their background, would receive equal ownership. He believed that anyone willing to love his son without wealth deserved a share in it. Amara stared at the envelope, making no move to take it. I don't want your money, Chitty. I never did. I know, he said softly. That's exactly why you deserve it. But more than that, I need you to understand, the only thing fake in our relationship was my poverty. Everything else was real. My feelings, my respect for you, my love, all real. When I cooked for you, when I held you at night, when I talked about our future children, I meant every word. The man you fell in love with exists. Amara, he's standing right here, terrified of losing you. Tears streamed down her face. I don't know if I can trust you again. Then let me earn it back, Chitty pleaded. I'm not asking you to forgive me today, or even this year. I'm asking for the chance to prove that my love is as real as yours was. Keep living in this apartment, if you want. I'll drive my taxi. We'll start over, but this time with complete honesty. No more secrets, no more tests. Just us, building something real. Amara looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the same man who'd made her laugh over jollof rice, who'd read poetry to her in bed, who'd held her when she cried about losing her family. Beneath the deception was the same person who'd treated her as an equal when he could have revealed his power at any moment. The same person who'd respected her mind, challenged her thoughts, and made her feel valued in ways no wealthy suitor ever had. I need time, she finally said, her voice trembling. Take all the time you need, Chitty said immediately. A week, a month, a year, however long it takes. I'll wait. Whether you want the billionaire or the taxi driver or anything between, I'll wait. Because losing you will be the only poverty I couldn't survive. He turned to leave, but Amara's voice stopped him. Chitty? He turned back, hope flickering in his eyes. The apartment in Surulere. Is it still ours? It was never my name. I genuinely rented it with a salary from driving. It's ours for as long as we want it. Good, she said quietly. Because if, and that's a big if, we're going to work through this, we do it there. In that tiny apartment where we were happy, where things felt real. A smile broke across Chitty's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen in days. Does this mean? It means I'm willing to try, Amara interrupted. But you're going to earn back my trust one day at a time. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts. Just honesty. Complete, uncomfortable, vulnerable honesty about everything. I can do that, Chitty said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise you, Amara, I can do that. 2 weeks later, Amara moved back into their small apartment in Surulere. Chitty kept his promise. No luxury cars, no mansion, no sudden transformation of their modest life. He continued driving his taxi 3 days a week, not because he needed the money, but because it reminded him of what truly mattered. The rest of the time, he worked with the Okafor Industries board, slowly assuming his responsibilities while maintaining the humility his father had hoped he'd learn. They attended counseling. Not couples therapy with some expensive private practitioner in Ikoyi, but sessions with a wise pastor from Chitty's church who'd known about the deception and had advised against it from the beginning. Pastor Adeyemi didn't coddle them or offer easy answers. He made them confront hard truths about trust, deception, and whether love could truly survive when its foundation had cracks. Love isn't just a feeling, Pastor Adeyemi told them during one particularly difficult session. It's a choice you make every day. The question isn't whether you love each other. Clearly you do. The question is whether you're both willing to choose each other every day, knowing the worst about each other now. Slowly, painfully, they rebuilt what had been broken. Chitty shared everything: his childhood, his struggles with his father's expectations, the loneliness of wealth, the relief he'd felt being anonymous. Amara shared her hurt, her anger, her fear that she'd always wonder what else he might be hiding. They fought, cried, and slowly learned to trust again. 3 months after the revelation, Amara invited her parents to visit the apartment in Surulere. They arrived in their Mercedes, looking uncomfortable in the modest neighborhood. Chief Okonkwo's face was carefully neutral, though his eyes widened at the tiny space. "This is where you live?" her mother asked, unable to hide her horror. "But, darling, you could have a mansion. Multiple mansions. Why are you still here?" "Because this is where we were happy," Amara said simply, holding Chitty's hand. "This is where we learn what really matters. And until we're sure we remember that lesson, we're staying." Her father was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Finally, he spoke, his voice gruff with suppressed emotion. "I was wrong. Amara, I thought you were foolish, throwing your life away. But you were wise in ways I couldn't see. You found something real." He turned to Chitty. "And you, young man, you hurt my daughter. But you also gave her a gift. You let her prove to herself and to everyone that her love was genuine. Many people never get that certainty. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a beginning." 6 months after the revelation, Amara and Chitty renewed their vows, this time in a ceremony that honored both their worlds. Half the wedding was at the Eco Hotel, a grand affair for the business world that expected it of the Okafor heir. But the other half was in Surulere, in the church where Chitty had worshipped during his taxi driving days, surrounded by the real friends who'd known them in their poverty. Amara wore 2 dresses, a custom couture gown for the formal ceremony, and a simple white Ankara dress for the church celebration. During the church vows, they exchanged the same simple silver rings they bought at the registry, refusing to replace them with expensive bands. "These rings," Chitty said in his vows, "represent the truth of us, simple, real, and priceless in their meaning. They're worth more to me than all the diamonds in the world because they symbolize when you chose me without wealth, without pretense, without conditions." Amara's vows were equally powerful. "You tested my heart and I passed, but you failed the test of trust. Today we both pass together. We choose honesty over deception, partnership over tests, and love that's strong enough to survive its own imperfections. This is our real beginning." They kept the apartment in Surulere, returning there every weekend without fail. No staff, no luxury, just the 2 of them cooking together, reading, talking, and remembering that the richest love is built not on what you have, but on who you choose to be with each other. In time, they started the Okafor Foundation, focused on education and opportunities for those trapped in poverty. Not handouts, but genuine pathways to better lives. Amara ran it with the same passion she'd shown in marketing, while Chitty transformed Okafor Industries into a company known not just for profits, but for integrity. One evening, a year after the revelation, as they sat in their Surulere apartment eating beans and plantain, Amara looked at Chitty and smiled. "You know what the irony is," she said. "What's that?" "If you'd told me the truth from the beginning, I probably wouldn't have believed your wealth didn't matter to me. I would have always wondered if I'd been influenced by it, even subconsciously. Your test, as painful as it was, gave me something precious, absolute certainty. I know beyond any doubt that I married you for you." Chitty took her hand. "And your forgiveness gave me something I didn't know I needed, proof that real love doesn't just survive mistakes. It transforms them into something stronger." In the end, Chitty's test had worked, but not the way his father intended. It tested them both, him on honesty, her on forgiveness. It revealed that true love is tested not just by wealth or poverty, but by the harder questions. Can you forgive the unforgivable? Can you trust someone who broke your trust? Can love built on deception become love built on truth? Amara and Chitty had their answer. And it was yes, but only because they both chose it every single day, in a tiny apartment in Surulere where they'd learned that the greatest wealth wasn't measured in money, but in the courage to be vulnerable, honest, and wholly, imperfectly human with each other. 3 years later, Amara sat in that same apartment, now pregnant with their first child. The apartment still stood unchanged. They bought the entire building and kept their unit exactly as it was, a reminder where their real journey began. Around them, the building had been transformed into a community center offering free education, job training, and support for struggling families, but their little sanctuary remained untouched. Chitty walked in with 2 plates of beans and plantain, settling beside her on their worn sofa. He placed his hand on her swelling belly, feeling their daughter kick. "She's strong," he said with wonder, "just like her mother." And honest, Amara added with a smile, like her father learned to be. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes only after surviving storms together. Through the window, they could see Lagos, chaotic, beautiful, challenging, the city that had witnessed their love story unfold. "Do you ever regret it?" Chitty asked suddenly. Not the test, but everything after. The hard work of rebuilding trust. Amara considered the question, her hand joining his on her belly. "Every great love story has a crisis," she said finally. "Ours just came earlier than most. But what we built after, the honesty, the real partnership, the absolute certainty. Most people spend their whole lives wondering if their love is real. We know ours is. We tested it in fire, and it came out as gold. Iron sharpens iron," Chitty quoted softly. "And love refines love," Amara completed. As a Lego sun set outside their window, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they sat together, a billionaire's wife in a tiny apartment, eating simple food, loving simply, and proving that the greatest treasures in life aren't found in bank accounts or mansions, but in the quiet moments of choosing each other again and again, in truth and in love. Their daughter kicked again, as if to remind them that some stories don't end. They simply begin anew, carrying forward the lessons learned and the love earned through struggle, forgiveness, and unwavering commitment. And in a city of millions, in a modest apartment in Surulere, that was more than enough. It was everything. The end. Did Amara make the right choice? Would you forgive such a deception for love? This story shows us that real love requires not just passion, but honesty, forgiveness, and daily choice. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the streets of Lagos and the depths of the human heart. If you love this story, subscribe to African Tales by Zion for more beautiful African love stories that touch the heart and challenge the soul. Hit that like button. Share with friends who believe in second chances and true love, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful tale. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Team Amara or Team Chitty? Was the test justified? What would you do in this situation? We love reading your perspectives. Until next time, remember, true love is tested not by wealth or poverty, but by truth and forgiveness. May your own love story be built on honesty and strengthened with every challenge. God bless you all. See you in the next story.